It's 1922 in southern Iraq. A British archaeological team digs into the ancient mound of Larsa and pulls a small clay prism out of the desert. The prism is covered with cuneiform writing. When translated, it lists the kings who ruled Sumer before the Great Flood. Their reigns are impossible. 8 kings reigning for a combined total of 241,200 years before the flood. Then the flood comes. And the post-flood kings have normal human lifespans. Today, we walk through exactly what the Sumerian King List says, why over 30 separate ancient tablets agree on these impossible numbers, what mainstream scholars argue the reigns actually mean, and why fringe theorists insist the old kings were not human. First, what the artifact actually is. The Weld-Blundell Prism is a small clay prism about 20 centimeters tall. It was made in approximately 1800 BC and is now housed in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford University. All 4 sides are covered with cuneiform script in Sumerian. The text is what scholars call the Sumerian King List. The list begins with a single phrase, quote, "When kingship was lowered from heaven," end quote. Now, the impossible numbers. The list names 8 kings who ruled 5 Sumerian cities before what the text calls. Quote, "The flood came," end quote. Their reigns are listed in years. Alulim of Eridu reigned 28,800 years. Algar of Eridu reigned 36,000 years. Enmenlu-Ana of Bad Tabira reigned 43,200 years. The 8 Antediluvian kings combined reigned for a total of 241,200 years. Then the flood arrives. After the flood, the post-flood kings appear in the list. Their reigns are still long by modern standards. 1,200 years, 900 years, 600 years. But not impossible. And as the list continues toward known historical kings, the reigns drop to reasonable human lifespans. By the time the list reaches known historical kings of the 3rd millennium BC, the reigns match independent archaeological evidence. These were real men. Their dates are confirmed. So the question becomes, were the antediluvian numbers always a mistake? Or did the Sumerians genuinely believe their oldest kings ruled for tens of thousands of years? Now the consistency that makes the question harder. Over 30 separate Sumerian cuneiform tablets containing the king list have been recovered from different archaeological sites. They agree almost perfectly on the impossible reign numbers. This is not the case of a single scribe making a transcription error. 30 separate copies made over 5 centuries by different scribes in different cities all preserved the same impossible numbers. Now the 3 theories. Theory 1. The Sumerians used a 60-based mathematical system that we still use for measuring time. Some scholars argue the impossible reigns reflect a misunderstanding of an ancient base 60 unit. The reigns may originally have meant something like 28,000 units of a much smaller time period. Theory 2. The impossible reigns are religious metaphor. The pre-flood kings were considered semi-divine in Sumerian mythology. The long reigns represented their proximity to the gods rather than their actual lifespans. Theory 3. Fringe theorists argue the impossible numbers were meant literally. The pre-flood kings were not human. They were a separate race, possibly from elsewhere, who genuinely ruled Sumer for tens of thousands of years before the flood ended their dynasty. No mainstream scholar accepts Theory 3. But no mainstream scholar can fully explain why 30 different ancient sources agree on the same impossible numbers either. 4,000 years after Sumerian scribes pressed those reign lengths into wet clay. The impossible numbers are still there, sitting in a museum case at Oxford, waiting for us to figure out exactly what their authors meant.